we're going to be having more and more people join in. And I think the cool thing will be, you know, even just having referral partners, meeting people from across the country, hearing what they're seeing in their markets can really help us have conversations with people in our markets too. So all of that is kind of our goal of this Monday call. So, and then for those of you that don't know it, I do live stream this call inside of the EXP Family Tree Workplace group. So those of you that are new to EXP, that is when you go into the workplace, where you have your own state groups and things of that nature. You were invited to and already are part of what is called EXP Family Tree. It's just another group inside of Workplace, but that's where we live stream all of our training. And you can go back and watch trainings that we've done in the past. Our Monday mindset calls and our market update calls for the last 3 or 4 months are all in there. And you can actually just go through the news feed. You can search a topic or a name. You could search my name for an example, and you'd see a lot of the different things that I've done in there. And it's just another great group for you guys to be part of. So we are now live streamed and it looks like we are recording. So I'm gonna let Angie and Nikki, you guys take it away. And then if there's any questions, you guys don't be shy, just raise your hand here in the group or just unmute yourself and I'll monitor anything that's happening in the chat, you guys, as well.
Thanks so much, Nikki. Go ahead.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday.
And Nikki, can you introduce yourself since we have 2 new people on the call? Thanks.
Yeah, so I am Nikki Erickson. I am with Kevnick Mortgage. We do residential mortgages for a lot of different clients around a lot of different states around the US. If I'm not personally licensed in the state, I can help you find somebody who is and help guide that client along the way. I noticed we had a couple new people from Idaho and Washington. I am licensed in both of those states, so that's helpful as well. So I'm just here to provide a market update every week and kind of give some strategy from a mortgage perspective on how you guys can help clients and kind of just the things that you need to know from, you know, your transactions and how it's going to affect kind of your daily and different situations that you'll get into with your clients. So as far as the market update goes, last week we had some really kind of just stability in the market. I haven't been able to say that for a really long time. So a little bit of ups and downs as far as interest rates goes, or as far as the cost of the interest rate, but nothing that was super mind-blowing, which is kind of good. I was kind of happy with that. You know, I didn't have to have those tough discussions of, oh, by the way, interest rates went way up today. Let's wait and see what happens tomorrow, you know, that type of thing. So we are still in the high 6s, low 7s to kind of just as far as a 30-year fixed goes, depending on how many points you want to pay to achieve your goal. This week is going to be a more stable week as well. However, we have some economic data that's going to give us hopefully a favorable bond market on Friday. What does that mean? Well, a favorable bond market basically means that mortgage interest rates go lower. The reason for that is they're expecting some numbers on the consumer price index side of things on Friday and the core PCE, which is going to actually help the bond market. With that being said, outside of that, there's a lot of pressure on the Fed right now to start lowering interest rates. A lot of the economists, a lot of the experts, a lot of everyone is coming out and saying, hey, you guys have been too restrictive this year. You've been, you know, kind of very much shelter in place, very much restrictive on what you're willing to do and how you're willing to push this market. And as a result of that, we're having a huge slowdown in housing, in people purchasing homes, in homes available on the market, things of that nature that are affecting all these other things. So there's a lot of pressure on the Fed right now to do something. And even Powell has came out and said, yeah, we've been pretty restrictive and pretty sheepish. We need to do something here. So we're very hopeful for those changes to come sooner rather than later, but we'll kind of see what happens. So a couple of things on the everyday side, I wanted to talk about 2 topics today. First and foremost, how the lowering of that Fed interest rate, or how the lack of lowering of that Fed interest rate, how that has bled into what I talk about when I say, you know, not as many homes on the market, people not able to buy homes, things of that nature. One of the big contributors to that is what we're seeing as a result of those mortgage interest rates not lowering is new builds stopping to be produced. Interestingly enough, in Florida in particular, they've actually stopped doing pretty much any new builds. I think there's only 13% of the actual builds that were supposed to happen this month. They're only doing about 13% of those. There's a ton of homes on the market in Florida, for example. And what is happening is because they're stopping to do that new builds, remember in the beginning of the year when we talked about the lack of housing or the lack of inventory, that's going to be starting to affect the lack of inventory even more. Another thing that's happening in particular in Arizona is the builders are actually saying, you know what? We've built these homes, we can't sell them, most likely in part due to interest rate and affordability. So we're going to have to rent these homes out. So we actually have realtors that I know in Arizona that are working on listings for builders to rent those homes out instead of having people purchase them. So these are just kind of the trickle down effects that happen when the Fed is more restrictive and these interest rates are staying as high as they are. Hopefully we'll get some relief to that soon, but that's just where you guys can be aware of that, of what's happening and what's going on as far as new builds, inventory, and how that's going to affect us, 3 to 6 months from now. With that being said, the second thing I want to talk about today is natural disasters. So particularly in Minnesota, Iowa, all those places around where we're seeing flooding. What happens to your listing when it's been affected by a natural disaster? What happens to a client who wants to purchase a home in a natural disaster area? And how do we on the mortgage side treat that? And how can we still have an effective closing for our client? So from a natural disaster perspective, Fannie and Freddie keep track of flooding, hurricanes, all those things that are happening in different particular areas of the United States. And they use a disaster announcement or an announcement that puts a particular area in a disaster zone. What that means is anytime you are trying to purchase a home in a disaster zone, like for example, if you were trying to purchase a home in Duluth, Minnesota right now, we as a lender have to do extra checks and balances to make sure that home is still standing when we close on the mortgage. So you as a realtor, you do your final walkthrough. Everything seems fine. Great. Awesome. We as a lender have to send an appraiser out to that property the day of closing to verify that that home is still standing and that there isn't water in the home and it hasn't been affected by the natural disaster. As long as we can get that appraiser out there on that day of closing, we can fund the loan, no problem. So what happens when we have issues? Well, those issues need to be resolved before we can close. Particularly back in 2013, when there was a lot of flooding happening, particularly in Minnesota, we had a lot of loans that were affected and a lot of people that were affected as far as being able to purchase homes while there was flooding happening. You go into a final walkthrough and there's water in the basement. So how do we work through that? So obviously the priority is to get that water cleared out of the basement, for example, and then to bring in the right people to make sure, the right inspectors, the right people to fix, the flood people to fix it, and then to put a timeline on that closing as this stuff is getting worked through and taken care of. You do as a realtor, obviously, the client has options to walk away from the purchase if there is a natural disaster, they don't feel like it's going to be remedied in time, or they have an opportunity to work with the sellers, or you guys have an opportunity to work with the agents to remedy the situation and make sure that it's all cleaned up and ready to go. And then us as a lender, we have to work through lock extensions, just different checks and balances. If we have bank statements that need to be re-verified or income that needs to be re-verified. So all those things can affect the timeline. So it's really important that you first and foremost, work with the lender. If their home is in a disaster area and something does happen to the property, work with your lender on timelines, make sure we set the right expectations, make sure we understand what needs to happen in order for the loan to close. Even if the home is totally fine, I still need time to get an appraiser out to the property, and that may affect when we can fund the loan. Because if an appraiser can't go out there till the afternoon on closing day, then that might push our closing actually to the next day. So it's a matter of verifying and making sure that that home is standing and in good working order. Thought it was just a relevant topic to touch on as we're seeing a lot of things happening, all over the US right now as far as disasters go. So if you do have a question or you do have a client that may or may not be in a disaster zone and you're not really sure, reach out to me. I can let you know pretty quickly whether or not that address of that property is in a disaster area and if that will affect your lending.
Wow. It is going on, especially here in Minnesota and different places. So
a lot of places. So we're moving into fire season. Obviously, the last few years we've had bad fire season here in the Pacific Northwest. So that's a reality. In fact, I was just talking to somebody, Lori and Toby, you might have run into this, but Tracy Bemis, who just partnered with us at EXP as well, and she's in Washington, literally couldn't find an insurance agency to insure one of her buyers' new homes, which was just crazy because they were both in what would be called a floodplain and fire danger because we've had a lot of fires in the last couple of years. So she literally they had to shop around, and I think they went to like 6 places before they actually found insurance in order to move forward with the closing. So that's a real thing here up in the Pacific Northwest. Obviously, Minnesota's had flooding. It was super dry for a while, and so they were worried about fires, but it sounds like that has been mitigated. But now we're looking at other parts of the country that are having a lot of other things happening in Florida is one of them with all of the hurricanes. So they're having a lot of issues with that. So that is a very good topic, you guys, for you to be aware of. The other thing, Nikki, I want to bring up, it's nice to hear that there wasn't a major change in interest rates. Of course, it's nice when there's some stability because we've been in this pretty volatile market. We went to an economic summit a few weeks ago with some of us up here in our neck of the woods. And all the chief economists that were standing up there really believed that we should see interest rates fall multiple times in 2025. Obviously, nobody has a crystal ball, but that is what they're anticipating for a whole bunch of reasons. And when you were just talking about inventory shortage and all of these new builds now putting pauses, we are in a shortage of homes across the United States right now, even when new homes were being built. And so when we start to see interest rates go down again, we're going to have a lot of these buyers who are sitting on the sidelines that can't buy today looking for properties. So we're likely going to be in another interesting market, which is low inventory, trying to find homes for our buyers. So in that case, if you have a buyer today that is like, oh, interest rates are high, it's kind of pricing me out, or I just don't like the payment, I'm approved, is it wise? And I know you can't, again, we don't have a crystal ball, but to me, it makes sense to be in a market where there are less buyers, try to negotiate on repairs, try to negotiate on price, get the best opportunity in the house, and you can always refinance should these interest rates go down. I do understand there are people that literally are being priced out of the market because of interest rates and they have to wait. But any thoughts on that? Because I think that we're in this time frame right now where we should be in preparation of that. We should be talking to our buyers, both of the ones that have to sit on the sidelines for a little bit and wait, but prepare them for the new year and get them ready for this. And also for the current buyers we have right now that are just trying to wait a little bit longer, but I'm wondering if waiting is really the right move.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's a couple things that we talk about when clients kind of sit there and go, oh, I don't like this payment, or oh, I don't know if I'm ready to buy. A good reminder for them is, if you guys remember the beginning of this year, everyone was like, oh, I'm just going to wait for home prices to fall. That's the one thing that we hear is, oh, home prices are going to fall because interest rates are going to be too high and people are not going to, be able to sell their house for what they did in 21 and 22. And although that might be true in some pocketed areas, overall, that's just simply untrue. Home prices and homes appreciate in value year over year. So keep the reminder in. Yes, this $400,000 home is going to be $425,000 next year. And even if that interest rate changes by 0.5%, you're still going to be paying more on a monthly basis for that home. So keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is, yes, you might say, okay, I don't really like the payment at 7.25%. Well, there's certain things that we can do, such as permanent buy downs. In other words, buy that interest rate down to 6.875 or 6.75, something that's more comfortable for them. Or we can do what's called a temporary buy down, where we're buying that interest rate down by 2 or 3% over the first 2 to 3 years. Now, I can get into kind of how that all works, but basically what it entails is prepaying the interest on the mortgage so that your monthly payment is 2% lower or 3% lower, depending on which year you are in the mortgage. What that does is it allows you to have a lower payment each month while we're waiting for interest rates to drop more permanently. The other cool thing about that is if you do use the 2-1 or the 3-1 buy down is what it's called, you do prepay that interest, or the seller prepays that interest for you, you do not lose that interest. So in other words, it goes into an escrow account, and if interest rates lower permanently, let's say you can now get down to 5.875 and you say, oh my gosh, I need to lock in at that more permanent rate, we can use the rest of that prepaid interest to either send it back to you in cash, because it's your money to keep. You can use it to apply towards the principal balance on the new mortgage, or you can use it to cover any closing costs on a refinance. So it's a very flexible use of that money, especially if you can get the seller to pay it, or if you want to prepay it up front. So a lot of times we'll talk about a strategy with each client on that temporary buy down or the permanent buy down, depending on what makes sense for them, how much they have in assets, and if they have the seller willing to contribute to that. So it is going to, like you said, Cari, it is going to be a market where there's a lack of inventory. So the opportunity to get seller paid closing costs is probably not going to be as high. However, we can do it on the buyer side and use their assets in a certain way to make it more advantageous for them overall. So it doesn't necessarily say, oh my gosh, you can't, we have to stop and put a pause on everything, but there are unique things that we can do to help those clients kind of tip over the fence and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'm ready and I can do this with confidence.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the tools to show. So it's kind of like you you, Nikki, let's use our lenders, let's use Nikki to show us and show the buyers why they may definitely be priced out or they may not. So many people are just going by what they hear, what their neighbor says, what their uncle says, what God forbid the news is saying, which is just clickbait. And it's not the right information. So it's really our job as the agent to show up and to have these high level conversations and be able to. And if you don't know how to have those conversations, that's where you're at the right place. You're with Cari, you're at EXP, and we have so many different forums and rooms you can go in and places you can go to get training on how to not only have these conversations, but spot the keywords or what they're saying and be able to not necessarily direct them any one which way, but take these blinders that so many people have on and be like, well, did you think about that? What about that? What about that? And all of a sudden they're like, oh no, I had no idea, nor should they, because they're not the expert. That's where we really have to show up and elevate as the expert. Absolutely. I love that. So good. Any questions in the chat, Cari, from live stream or here on the call? Unmute
Yeah,
yourself.
anybody here? We've got Aminata, Toby, Lori. Do you guys have any comments or thoughts on any of this or questions for Nikki? I do not have any questions on the live stream, but we have a number of people watching. So you guys remember, you can go ahead and just ask a question right here in the live stream and we'll see it. So if you have one, type it in the chat box. Anyone else?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, Aminata.
Yeah, Nikki, I have about 2 buyers that just saying right now they're gonna wait and they're gonna pay more debt just to get a better approval because they're under 325. Is there any way, like, you know, how just to word that what you just said, you know, try to give them the options, other options like you mentioned here? Do you like have something that you send to people like that?
Yeah, so what we can do is we can send them over what they're qualified for right now and kind of what those numbers look like. And then depending on, the debt that they're paying off and whatever, we can help say, okay, if you pay off this much debt, then you get to 350. If you pay off this much debt, you can get to 400, and kind of just outline that for them along the way so that they understand that as they're paying down the debt, that purchase price is increasing and what they can qualify for is increasing. And then continuing to do that process. Sometimes I do it bi-monthly, sometimes I do it monthly, depending on the client, and kind of just say, okay, here's where interest rates are now. Your numbers have changed to around this, and sometimes it's not a lot of change, but it kind of helps encourage people along the way to continue to pay down that debt so they understand the relationship between what they qualify for now and where they're going from a debt payoff standpoint, so that they can really see those numbers in real time and say, okay, I know that I can reach this certain goal by paying down my debt. What does that look like? And what does it look like 2 months from now? And what does it look like 3 months from now? And things of that nature. So it's definitely something that I would encourage them to kind of just see if they can seek out those options so that it gives them the encouragement and the motivation to qualify for that larger payment and that larger house. Because if you think about it, debt payoff, they're paying that debt anyway. They're paying that amount anyway. So if we can kind of push it over to the mortgage side of things or the housing payment side of things, then they're paying on an appreciating asset, not paying on their credit card debt.
Mhm.
Which is huge. I
Thank
think
you.
someone asked for my contact information there. So I'll be typing that in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I had one thing too, Cari, before we go, that I just wanted to share that kind of came up this week with one of the agents that I'm coaching, is your business plan. Again, we're halfway through the year, and I know I talked about that last year, but another layer to that, especially if you're here at EXP, there are so many tools and programs and things that you can be a part of. So, and it's very overwhelming if you're new. There's just a lot coming at you because there's so much to do and to be a part of. So I encourage you to look at your business plan, look at where we're at mid-year, and what can you start doing? I know in one of the business plans that I used to do, it was like, what book are you going to read every month? Or how are you going to educate yourself? I want you to take that another step forward and think about that, especially with EXP. What platform are you going to get involved in? Like right now, I'm going through Express Offers, which is blowing my mind. And I've been here a year and a half. Shame on me. But think about that so that you can start putting a plan together throughout the rest of the year and going into 2025 of how you're going to use all the tools and the resources at your fingertips and become the expert and get involved, not all at once, but make it part of your business plan and hold yourself accountable. Get someone to hold you accountable to make sure that you're not only utilizing what you know, but what you're not aware of yet. So important.
Yeah. And speaking of that, am I unmuted? Yes, I am. Speaking of that, this call is going to be used for accountability if anybody wants it moving forward as well. Like I shared after the 4th of July, we want you guys to come in, chat what was last week that you wanted to focus on. Did you do it? Be accountable to this group. We aren't going to spend a lot of time on it because we don't want this to drag out to be a long meeting, because part of the beauty of this meeting is we get information, we can go execute. It's informative, but it's also not taking up a ton of your time. So you can actually go get into action. But for those of you that are new on this call or watching the live stream, a reminder, one of the things that I love about this call is that Nikki comes in here to give us information in real time about what's going on in the market as it pertains to interest rates and just the market in general. Angie and I are coming in here and talking to you about maybe something that we're noticing in the market. We're talking to agents and coaching them on a daily basis. And we want to bring you relevant information, but the most important thing is what you do with that information. If you come in here for 30 minutes, you gather the information, you take some mental or written notes, and now you go share this with your prospects, your leads, your database, your sphere of influence, your past clients, your friends, your family. Be the local expert of choice. Be the local economist. Don't let people fall prey to the media and what they're hearing on social media or their neighbor. Like Angie said, you're supposed to be the one sharing the right information. So what are you going to do with this information you learn every Monday? Are you going to post it on social? Are you going to send text messages? Are you going to send an email? What are you going to do? And if you get yourself into consistent action every Monday after attending this call, you will have results in your business. And that's really what our goal is. And so bring in some accountability if you had something that you wanted to do. Maybe it's just as simple as last week after the call, I did this and I got a result, and we can encourage each other. But we really want to bring a little bit of an element of accountability to this call. Obviously, when we enter the call, if you don't mind, and we'll remind you moving forward, is type in where you service clients, because it's nice to know each other for referral purposes, potentially. Nikki will always put her information in here. So if she says something and you need some information from her, her information will be there. She does a lot of great stuff on Instagram and TikTok. And so if you're trying to have more content to put out there, oftentimes you can actually share people's information. You can kind of do the duet thing. If you guys don't know what that is, talk to me later and I'll help you understand it. But, you know, sharing information through Nikki, for an example, is also a really easy way to do it if you don't even remember how to articulate it. So we're trying to give you really easy ways to get into action, because the new goal should be execution, not just saying what we want to do, but actually doing what we say we're going to do is really what the goal should be on a daily basis, but for sure on a weekly basis. So if you can continue to join us here for 30 minutes and do it on a consistent basis, I think that you will find benefit. And please tell your friends so we can get them on the call as well. We're going to continue to grow this as we move into July and the rest of the year after the 4th. We are at half a year, you guys.
Yes.
We are at mid-year.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, and just another point on the Instagram and the TikToks, mine are all shareable. I committed to doing a TikTok on whatever the topic is that I talk about every Monday now. So that'll be up and available for you guys to share and to, like you said, to duet or to stitch or whatever, you know, the term is that you need to use to put it as part of your social media. I'm always going to be available to share. You can always tag me in it and things like that. And we can always work together to kind of boost that social media energy that you have out there.
Love it.
So great.
And how do we, is that like on YouTube? How do we find that?
You can find me on Instagram and you can find me on TikTok and under my handle, Mortgages from MN to AZ. And then all of those videos that you see, everything that you click on, you should be able to share it, and you should be able to, you know, even just be a duet on it or whatever you want to do. You should be able to find it on TikTok and Instagram pretty easily.
Angie can probably help you with that as well.
Yeah.
Yep, I can do that.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, you guys, if there's no other questions or comments, so just anybody raise your hand or chat in the chat box or unmute yourself really quickly if you want to. And then if not, we'll wrap it up.
Thank you so much, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes. Are we having a call next week? Yes.
What is the call? Good question. Let's take a look. It is Monday the 1st. So yes, we sure will if you're able to.
I am.
Awesome. I just wanted to
So
double
we'll see you guys next week. And then moving forward after the 4th, we'll have an announcement. We might be moving this call up just a little bit and we'll be doing some information on that. So stay tuned, but we'll get that out in marketing to you guys so you know where it all is. And if anybody who comes on regularly starts wanting to be added to the calendar invite, we can just add them to the calendar invite. So it's on their calendar, set it and forget it. So
Awesome.
all right, you guys, thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.